The sound of glass scraping against the window woke me at 2:17 in the morning. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard a trembling hand knock softly against the frame. I sat up, heart pounding, and reached for the lamp. When I pulled the curtain aside, I froze. My ex-mother-in-law was standing outside my bedroom window, soaked from the rain, her hair disheveled, one hand gripping the sill as she struggled to climb inside. This was the same woman who had once told me I would never be good enough for her son. The same woman who had stood beside him when our marriage collapsed. And now she was looking at me with terrified eyes, whispering through the glass, "Please, let me stay tonight." I unlocked the window and helped her inside. She stumbled onto the carpet, breathing heavily, her expensive coat torn at the sleeve and streaked with mud. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. My ex-husband's mother had never apologized to me, never called after the divorce, and never once asked how I was surviving alone. Yet there she stood in the middle of my bedroom at 2 in the morning, trembling like a frightened child. I wanted to ask what had happened, but the fear in her face stopped me. Whatever had driven her to climb through my window had to be serious. Before we continue, if stories about second chances, unexpected kindness, and people finding their way back to each other touch your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Bright Acts for more powerful stories about second chances. 3 years earlier, I had married Daniel believing I had finally found my forever home. We had been happy at first. Daniel was hardworking, charming, and ambitious, while I was quieter and more cautious. His mother, Margaret, was wealthy, proud, and convinced that her son deserved someone from a more respectable family. I tried desperately to earn her approval. I cooked for her, remembered her birthday, visited her when she was sick, and even listened patiently whenever she criticized my clothes, my job, or the way I managed our home. Nothing was ever enough. But I kept telling myself that love required patience. Then Daniel changed. He began coming home late. His phone became something he guarded like a secret. Small arguments became constant battles, and Margaret always seemed to appear whenever we were having problems. Eventually, Daniel told me he wanted a divorce. He said he had fallen in love with someone else and wanted a different life. I remember standing in our kitchen while he packed a suitcase, feeling as if the floor beneath me had disappeared. Margaret stood behind him without saying a word. Before leaving, Daniel looked at me and said that perhaps we had simply been a mistake. The divorce destroyed more than my marriage. Daniel convinced me to give up my claim to several things because he promised we could settle everything peacefully. Margaret assured me that I would eventually find someone better. I believed them. What I didn't know was that Daniel had already been hiding financial problems, and after the divorce, his situation became much worse. The business he had proudly built began collapsing. His new relationship ended almost as quickly as it had started. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life slowly. I found a better job, rented a modest house, and learned how to enjoy quiet mornings without being afraid of what someone else thought of me. Margaret disappeared from my life completely. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had lost a great deal of money trying to rescue Daniel's failing business. She sold her vacation property and moved into a smaller house. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't contact her. Too much pain still lived between us. Then, months later, Daniel died unexpectedly in a car accident. The news shattered something inside me, even though we had been divorced. Whatever had happened between us, he had once been the man I loved. I attended the funeral quietly and left before Margaret could see me. That night, however, Margaret found me. I stared at her as she sat on the edge of my bed, holding her trembling hands together. Finally, she told me the truth. After Daniel's death, she had discovered that he had been involved with dangerous people because of his debts. Some of them believed Margaret still possessed money she no longer had. For weeks, strangers had appeared near her home. Someone had broken into her garage. Another person had left threatening messages. She had gone to the police, but there was not enough evidence to identify anyone. That evening, she had noticed a car following her. Terrified, she had driven around until she was certain she had lost them. Then she remembered my house. She had been too ashamed to knock on my front door, so she climbed through my window. I could have told her to leave. A part of me desperately wanted to. I remembered every cruel comment, every moment she had made me feel like an outsider, every time she had defended Daniel while blaming me for our failing marriage. But looking at her that night, I no longer saw the powerful woman who had judged me. I saw an exhausted mother who had lost her son and was now terrified of losing everything else. I gave her a blanket and made tea. She slept on the sofa while I stayed awake, listening to the rain against the windows. By morning, something inside me had changed. Forgiveness did not erase what she had done. It simply meant I refused to let old pain decide who I would become. The next morning, Margaret apologized. Not dramatically, not with excuses. She simply admitted that she had treated me unfairly because she had been obsessed with controlling Daniel's life. She said she had blamed me because blaming someone was easier than accepting that her own son had made terrible choices. Then she handed me an old envelope. Inside was a letter Daniel had written shortly before his death. I read it with shaking hands. Daniel had written that he regretted how he had treated me. He admitted that he had allowed his mother to interfere with our marriage and that he had blamed everyone except himself. He never sent the letter because he was ashamed. At the bottom, he had written that if I ever read it, he hoped I would build a life where I never again questioned whether I was worthy of love. I cried that morning, not because I wanted Daniel back, but because I finally understood that closure doesn't always come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes it comes when you realize you no longer need their approval. Margaret stayed for 3 nights. During that time, we contacted an attorney and worked with the police to document the threats. Eventually, the people who had been pursuing her were connected to Daniel's financial dealings, and authorities were able to intervene. Margaret was safe, but she didn't immediately leave my life. She began visiting once a week. At first, our conversations were awkward. Then they became easier. We cooked together. We talked about Daniel. Sometimes we laughed at memories. Sometimes we cried. Slowly, the woman who had once been my greatest source of pain became someone I could understand. Months later, Margaret sold the last property she owned and donated a portion of the money to a local shelter for women rebuilding their lives after divorce and family hardship. She told me she wanted to create something good from the years she had spent making mistakes. One afternoon, she handed me the keys to a small apartment she had purchased and said it was for women who needed somewhere safe to begin again. She asked me to help manage it. I accepted. That apartment eventually became more than a building. It became a place where women arrived broken and left stronger. And every time I watched someone walk through its doors carrying nothing but a suitcase and hope, I remembered that rainy night when my ex-mother-in-law climbed through my bedroom window. I used to think she had come into my house because she needed saving. Years later, I realized she had come into my life because we both needed healing. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Bright Acts. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become the beginning of an entirely different life. And before the story ends, I want you to leave one special comment. I believe in second chances. Because sometimes the person standing outside your door isn't asking you to forget what happened. They're simply asking for one chance to become better than who they used to be. And sometimes, opening the door doesn't just save them. It saves a part of you too.